Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. A year ago, when I moved to town, I got a primer on how to drive the Nashville streets. The biggest and most important part of that lesson, wave when someone lets you merge into traffic. I quickly caught on, so much so that when I let people merge into traffic and they don't wave, I get a little salty, only like a grain or two. I'm becoming more Nashvillian each day. In all seriousness, there are certain expectations here when it comes to being polite. Where do they come from? And how are they changing? Later this hour, we'll talk about Nashville's Nice with a historian, an author, and some native Nashvillians. But first, it's time for At Us. Each week, we take time to read the comments so you don't have to. Yes, I'm encouraging you to literally at us on Twitter at This Is Nashville and on Instagram at ThisIsNashville_WPLN. Joining me now with a look back at the past week is our digital lead, Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Hey, Anna.
Hey, Khalil. It's always good to be back in the studio.
Good to have you back with us. So what's on our listeners' minds this week?
Well, a lot of people have been talking about one topic WPLN health reporter Blake Farmer has been following. Blake joined us on Monday to explain why Republican lawmakers want to investigate Vanderbilt University Medical Center's transgender health clinic.
Yes, it's because a far-right YouTuber accused the clinic of harming children.
That's right, even though there's no evidence to back up that claim. On Instagram, two of our listeners shared their concerns about the baseless claims against Vanderbilt. Eartha Kitsch, which I love that name. Anyways, Eartha Kitsch wrote, quote, "That guy is putting out the kind of fear-mongering and misinformation that attracts people like that Pizzagate nut. It's very dangerous."
Man, Pizzagate, that's something I haven't heard in a while. It's a reference to a conspiracy theory from like 5 years ago, back at that top Democrats were running a child sex trafficking ring out of a D.C. pizza shop.
Yeah, which was definitely not true. But anyways, another Instagram user named Jack chimed in too. They said, quote, "This rhetoric describes trans people and our medical care as mutilation and atrocities. It's so dangerous and harmful to trans people trying to live their lives as happily and peacefully as possible."
I mean, I think that's what they're trying to do, live their lives as happily and as peacefully as possible. All right, so what else we got?
So yesterday's episode about marching bands was incredibly fun to listen to, and the TSU Aristocrat of Bands received plenty of love online.
As they should. That album is amazing. Be sure to go out and get it. Yeah.
It's fire. But we did receive a very interesting comment from one listener who simply goes by A on Twitter. They wrote into us asking high school band directors to maybe turn the music down a little bit. Anyways, they wrote, quote, "As someone who lives near Pearl Cone High School, I will be glad when it's over and band practice will hopefully not run until 11:30 p.m. each night. That's way too late for children to be doing anything school-related." I mean, I don't have any kids, so I never really thought about that, but it does make me very, very grateful that I do not live close to a high school.
It reminds me of those ads from back in the day. It's 11:30 p.m. Do you know where your sousaphone player is? Okay, so one thing we know very well is that This Is Nashville. It's an hour that goes by really, really quickly.
Oh boy, ain't that the truth.
So during Tuesday's show about affordable housing, we had a panel of residents talking about what's affordable to them. Before we said goodbye, we asked them what they would like to ask our next guests, Councilmember Berkeley Allen and MDHA board member Dr. Paulette Coleman. Unfortunately, because we got so many to get through with questions and comments from our listeners, we ran out of time to answer their questions in the live show. But after we went off air, I handed over my host chair to our multimedia producer, Rose Gilbert, to ask those questions of our guests.
So our guest, Samantha Tidwell, asked, quote, "I know I'm very privileged, but we still struggle to go on vacation because we struggle to afford the house that we have. How can this be helped? Is there something we can do with taxes or childcare?" Anyways, here's what Berkeley Allen said.
State law says how taxes work, so there's not much leeway there. There is a movement in the Metro Council just trying to create other options for childcare to make it less difficult for childcare to be provided. We're working on removing some of the state and metro licensing obstacles that often are totally different and incredibly confusing. That may create more options for neighborhood-centered childcare or smaller church-centered childcare. And having more of that, I think, can help with hopefully reducing the cost.
That was actually something we touched on in our childcare episode. Okay, so another guest from Tuesday, Kier Obana, had this question for our officials. He said, quote, "It's difficult to go from being poor to being middle class. Will there be more programs for people who fall in between those classes to be able to afford housing without having to move to Antioch or even further out of Nashville?" End quote. Here's the council member again.
There's an interesting model that the Martha O'Brien Center is shepherding through the process that deals with the, quote, benefits cliff, which is if you are receiving public subsidies, often once you get a better opportunity, then that cuts all your subsidies out from underneath you suddenly so that you actually take a step backwards when you get a raise, which is terrible. And they've put together a very sophisticated mathematical model that they will be administering in a multi-county region to support people through that transition from having a job that doesn't give you enough to pay your rent to moving up to the next level while not drastically losing the food subsidies you may be getting or whatever, so that it's a net gain every step of the way until you get to the point where you can be self-sufficient.
So the last question was from Carolyn Nafee with Our Place Nashville, who simply asked, can we get more money for affordable housing here in Nashville? Here's what Dr. Coleman and Berkeley Allen said.
The American Rescue Plan has helped us to get an onslaught of money that we would not have had. And then the challenge will be after that's gone, what do we do and how do we sustain it?
We are being more direct about providing money for affordable housing. When the Barnes Affordable Housing Fund was first created, it had $250,000 in it, and we were excited. And now we're putting $15,000 a year into it. And I believe that the current federal administration is paying more attention to how housing affects everything else. And there's more money that will come through HUD and through our local housing development agency that could be applied toward long-range solutions.
I'm happy we had time to get those answers to those questions from our guests. I know affordable housing is a topic that we'll keep circling back to, for sure. Thanks to our digital lead, Anna Gallegos-Cannon, for this roundup. Anna, we'll see you soon.
Of course, and our listeners know where to find me online.
Don't forget to add us on Twitter and Instagram. Let's keep the comments coming. Also, fill out our community survey to let us know what topics you want us to cover at thisisnashville.org. It is super easy and quick, and it helps us produce shows with your needs and interests in mind. We have to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about our quirky mannerisms and niceties here in Nashville. What do you think makes up Nashville nice? Whether you're new here or born and raised, we want to hear your thoughts. Bless your heart is a given. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. My mother always told me and my siblings that it's better to be kind than nice. I thought I knew what she meant, but as I grew older, I saw the wisdom in her words. Now I see that being nice sometimes serves as a kind of surface-level mask. To be kind is genuine and heartfelt. Now, I've lived in other parts of the country where people are not concerned with being nice or kind. So I had a tiny bit of culture shock when I moved to Nashville. Almost everyone is very nice. I noticed it right away. I also spent a lot of time asking myself if people were being true or, as us Gen Xers say, real. For some of the verdict is pending, but I will say that in my experience, Nashville is a very welcoming place. But what is Nashville nice and what does it mean? My next guests are here to help answer that question. Freda Player is a longtime Nashvillian who is also executive director at the nonprofit Emerge Tennessee, and Dr. Carole Bucy is the official Davidson County historian. Freda, Dr. Bucy, thank you so much for being here. Welcome This is Nashville.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
So, Freda, I'd like to start with you. What does Nashville Nice mean to you?
Nashville Nice is Nashville Pacific Southern genteelness. Mm-hmm. It's where you come into a town, people will speak to you, people will make sure you know your way. Do you have a church home? Just making sure you're settled in and creating an initial sense of community. And that's what I experienced when I came to 1996, when I came to Fisk University. And then as I kind of stayed here for a while, that was my introduction to Nashville Nice. It's this Nashville's Pacific version of the Southern genteelness and the Southern hospitalities that you experience anywhere in the Southeast.
Describe what it was like for you in 96 when you first encountered it.
Well, I came from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. That's my hometown. And I came here to go to Fisk, and I was making sure I got settled in, making sure I had a way to the grocery store, making sure I had things that I needed to set into my dorm. When the holidays came, professors made sure I had a place to eat for Thanksgiving or Christmas if I couldn't make it home, and same with my classmates. So that's really more than Nashville Nice. Make sure you had a home. I had suggested churches. When church I went to at the time, they made sure I had a place to stay. They fed me on Sundays after church. So especially as a college kid and being broke, that good home meal always kind of filled my belly and my heart and my soul. And so that was really Nashville Nice, knowing that you had some place to eat, some place to take care of if you really needed a ride. And then also checking in with my family. People who met my parents when they came and dropped me off from school, they would ask, how's your family doing? How's your dad? How's your mom? In a genuine way. They actually remember who they are and really inquired about their well-being that I wouldn't find in my hometown in Pennsylvania unless they had a relationship with my parents.
Now, Dr. Bucy, how about you? When did you hear Nashville Nice, and what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear that?
The first thing that comes to mind when you speak about Nashville Nice is that there is this level of kindness and graciousness about Nashville that I think Nashville is very proud of. Very early on, the business community here, really before 1900, began what we refer to as boosterism, out trying to sell the city to other cities. And so, of course, Nashville's location played some part in this. We were not part of the Deep South, and pretty much the Nashville establishment wanted people to know we were different from the Deep South states. And so it was this feeling of this is a unique place. It's Southern, yes, but it's not that Southern. And yet you see that if you start peeling off the layers of niceness and gentility, it goes back, the history goes back to some darker things in our history. It was a code of sorts of how people, particularly people who had formerly been enslaved or were free blacks even before the Civil War, and Nashville did have a substantial population of free blacks here, they learned this code of how they had to act. And certainly lower class whites were also put into this category of needing to know this code, but yet they seem to see themselves as a step up above the people who had formerly been enslaved. And so what you see here in Nashville is yes, we had some water fountains, a lot of water fountains, in fact, that had whites and colored on them. The same was true of restrooms in public buildings. In some public buildings, such as the courthouse, which used to be the center of both the city government and the county government before Metro, you had people going to whichever bathroom had to be the closest to their office. And so those codes weren't rigidly enforced, but then some were, and African Americans had really realized what the limits were. And so it was really a shock to the city of Nashville in 1957 when the first public schools in Nashville were going to be integrated that September, that a bomb went off at Hattie Cotton School where several African-American children had been enrolled. And I think that was in some ways Nashville's wake-up call. Mayor Ben West really was stunned by this happening in his city. And so you've got to look at all the dynamics of this. Yes, Nashville is a place that is very friendly. You get on the elevator, and one of the things you notice about Nashville versus New York, where Tracey has lived, is that people don't make eye contact when you walk down the street. And here in Nashville, people make eye contact when they're walking down the street. And, if somebody stops you in the parking garage at the library there and they're trying to get to some building and it's clear they got out of a car from a different state, if they come up to you and say, "Can you tell me where XYZ is, the Ryman Auditorium?" you feel very comfortable striking up a conversation with them. And it's true. The questions are, where are you from? You get in the elevator, where are you from? And it will get down to, what question would you say, Freda? Question 3 or 5 of, and where do you go to church?
Church home. Yep.
Church home.
Now, I have yet to be asked about my church home, but I also was told that when you're crossing the street, you make eye contact with the driver. But I don't know if that's polite or more for safety reasons as a pedestrian. Now, Freda, Dr. Bucy mentioned our city's history with racial segregation. So how are the rules of Nashville Nice? How do they kind of play into that? How are they different between Black and white spaces?
One place I would say, particularly by profession, I'm a political consultant. And so what I really see it in the activist community, in the political community, is that in the Black political community, you really have to go and have conversations with the political elders or the political leaders when you want to get involved, when you want to run for office. And that's one way it's different, that you really have to go and kind of, I call it, do the political tour and really kind of either get their blessing or let them know that you're running. That's a whole different kind of political conversation. But I think that's really different in the Black community, of really paying homage, paying respect to those who blaze a political trail, particularly in the segregated South when Metro government formed and the traditional Black historic seats that are councilmatic seats that exist. I think that was really the difference compared to the white community. Usually in the political realm, it's more of you have that one gatekeeper that would just open up and verify and give you that credential to go through the political sphere. And I think that's more the difference of how the community works between the two.
I want to bring in my next guest. She's an entrepreneur, business mentor, and native Nashvilleian. Tracey Hughes Royal, welcome to This is Nashville.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you're a 5th generation Nashvilleian. How would you define Nashville Nice?
I look at it from the business perspective. And growing up here in Nashville, being born in Nashville, but also living in New York for 18 years, I can go do a direct comparison. For example, as Dr. Bucy mentioned, there's a difference between looking a person in the eye versus not looking them in the eye. In New York, people are busy and they have somewhere to go. So they're not being rude, they're being direct, and they're trying to get to where they're going. Here in Nashville, in terms of Nashville Nice, we like to strike up a conversation, get to know you, especially if we were looking to do business, not coming in and striking an immediate business deal. They may want to do happy hour or have dinner, break bread, and understand your family, your values, your background, where'd you come from, what do you like. They will have the social conversation or the social graces before they even move into a business realm. So I've really been operating from the Nashville Nice in terms of how you do business. You can't come here and expect to have an immediate deal and not sit down and have dinner and just talk about each other's families.
What are the benefits of that? I mean, I understand that to be successful in business, it's about building those relationships, but talk about the business benefits or detriments of the New York style of let's get straight to the point, and the Nashville style of, hey, let's have these social graces. Let's learn a little bit more about the person you'll potentially be doing business with.
As a publicist, I have a PR company here, and I did PR in New York. I can tell you show you a direct comparison. So in New York, you are calling the assignment desk at the news station, and you are pitching your story and hoping they will run it. They're very short. They're very to the point. Just tell me what it is, and then they hang up. and you may not know that your story was picked up. Here in Nashville, you can call an assignment desk or call a producer. They will take time to chat with you, learn a little bit about your story. Not only if they run the story, they will actually send you a link or show you where the story ran. So they're into the relationship where there's a slight investment of time.
I like that. Now, speaking of breaking bread, we got a tweet from at thisisnashville.org from at DixieGirl256. Says, being Nashville Nice is bringing food when there's a death in the family. Usually your signature dish, a casserole or a pie, typically cheese. Typically chess, pardon me. And, you never...
Chess pie.
Chess
yes,
pie.
get it right now. Get
That's
it right.
my favorite dessert.
I haven't had it yet.
Chess pie.
You're
Okay.
missing something big.
Okay, I am. Okay, Nashville Nice, thank you for putting me onto that. I'm going to get some chess pie.
And you can find a chess pie in a local grocery store in the bakery department, and it's worth the treat.
Okay.
Or at a meet in 3.
All right.
At a meet in 3, for sure.
Definitely. We had a show about meat and threes not too long ago. I'm going to go down to Arnold's and get me some. Now, she finishes the tweet by asking, and you never visit someone's home without bringing something, even if it's just a 6-pack. Freda, does that ring true?
Yes. You always have, I have a stash of hostess gifts in my house, whether it's, little smell goods or soap or something. Yeah, you have to bring something. And that's, I had a surgery a couple of weeks ago, and I got overwhelmed of, my generation, Gen X, we don't bring dishes as much as in, I'm going to order you Uber Eats, or I'm going to do it. So I got Venmo'd, $20, $50 to order a meal, or people just, had Uber Eats just drop me off a meal after my surgery. And I got overwhelmed where I had to tell people, can we postpone this a couple days? Because I have too many leftovers for that. And I would say that is very true, that whether you have illness, whether you have surgery, whether there's a funeral in the family, yes, you will have plenty of food to go that you might even have to freeze it or share it with your neighbors.
Okay. If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekalona. We're talking this hour about the idea of so-called Nashville Nice. We want to hear from you. If you're new, what social niceties have surprised you? If you're from here, what stands out to you? Tweet us at This Is Nashville, and look, there are no wrong answers. So, how about the other side of this, Freda? Like, is there a way that an outsider might not understand that someone in Nashville is just being nice? I'm thinking of something I've heard described as the Nashville no.
Yes. So the very basic of it, as someone who's done community organizing and who's done canvassing for political campaigns, if someone says, I might come, I'll think about it, that is a no. But they're not going to tell you, because going back, about, they want to respect your time and your effort. And so that's part of the gentleness. So when I would come back and we have our debriefs, it's like, well, I got these maybes, so they're going to come. I was like, did they say maybe or think? They're like, yes. Like, they're not coming.
Okay.
And that's part of the Nashville Nice. Like, we're never going to say, no, I can't make it. I have an obligation. We're just like, well, I'll think about it. I'll try. The other part of that is it does have a kind of a negative connotation where you see in the political world, and kind of like we were talking about in the business world, it's more of, we're going to let you go so far. And that what I've run into my other elected official colleagues is that, why doesn't this happen in Nashville? I was like, well, this is Nashville. That's how we do it. That you have to respect the political culture, or they felt like you haven't paid your dues. And so the elected officials who are transplant, particularly in the last decade, they run against this brick wall of, I want to do this, I want to accomplish this. And I was just like, whoa, hold up. You have to pay your dues. You have to go do the tour. You have to kiss the ring, because when it goes back to that social graces, and the same thing in the political world, you have to have the dinners, you have to have the cocktails, because it's more of, are we going to the same vision? And also, are you dismantling what I've worked for that you don't know about? And I tell people, just because you see it, don't see it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Okay.
And I think that's a little bit the aspect of, they're going to be nice, so let's talk about it. And then all of a sudden you get freezed out and no one's returning your calls, or they're postponing your calls, just because that you're running against that brick wall of, you're not going to dismantle what I'm doing or what I'm trying to accomplish. But I'm not going to cut you off like you would in the Northeast and say, nope, you're interfering with my political agenda, and I'm going to stop you right now.
Dr. Bucy, you want to weigh in?
Well, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, there are definitely limits and things that you shouldn't do. Nashville does not want to be seen as an unpleasant place. There is a level of pleasantness everywhere, and if we're often not direct. We say, well, I'll think about it when you don't want to go to that, or whatever it is, I'll think about it, which is really code for no. And another thing you see here is, and my daughter grew up here in Nashville and now lives in Sweden. So she and her husband and 3 kids were here for 5 weeks this summer. And Ellen was struck by all of the people in the grocery store saying to her, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. And, she couldn't get over that. And her little children who are bilingual, they were stunned at anybody saying, yes, ma'am. And certainly in the North, in New York, for example, you don't have the server say, well, yes, ma'am. And so it's an interesting thing, but there are these gentle things you have to do to be really to feel a part of the community.
Yeah, when your elder says, if you don't hear what they say, you never say what. You always say, ma'am, sir. They hear the repeat what they're saying. It's like little things like that. It's also like a trigger of knowing whether you're from Nashville or not. And I remember just being the cousin that always came down south for the summer. I always had to learn that code switch of, oh, you never say to an elder, what? I didn't hear you. And he's like, ma'am. And then they repeat and keep on going.
That's funny because my mother raised me with that ethic, but she's a New Yorker. Dad's from upstate New Jersey. So it's interesting of how but their parents are from the South. So they pass that along the family line. Now, Tracey, you work with politicians as well, right?
I teach social media classes to Tennessee politicians. UT County, Tennessee, they retain my firm to teach them. So I actually taught a class this past Tuesday to some newly elected officials from Sumner County, Montgomery County, Williamson County, Davidson County.
How are they reacting to the codes of conduct about niceness in Nashville?
I will say, well, the way I teach, it makes media easy to understand and accessible. So we don't really go into the codes of the Nashville Nice, but I will say what we do is look for commonalities. So for example, whatever your platform may have been, how can you integrate that into your brand? Because essentially you are offering a promise of service in that position. And how do you leverage that in terms of your posts and your media? And incorporating that is also following into how do you create relationships? How do you connect with your constituents? Even those who may not have voted for you, how do they feel as though you're there to serve all? So that's the way I approach it, where it's totally, nonpartisan, but it incorporates the congenial elements within Tennessee, because this is just outside of Nashville, so within Tennessee. Because you're still playing the game, and you still need to find a way to communicate effectively.
Okay, now, Dr. Bucy, you mentioned a little bit of this before, but where do you think some of our rules of etiquette and deference come from? Is that a historical link?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a historical link because the first people who settled in the South were generally second and third and fourth sons of nobility. They were their father was a duke or an earl, and Big Brother was going to inherit the estate in England. So these people came over here. All people came to the United States who came willingly, were coming for what a new world offered, opportunity. And so the English brought with them their expectations of people who were not on their level of society. And so consequently, for a while, we had a lot of indentured servants who came because they couldn't get over here any other way. But we also then began to bring in enslaved people from Africa as the mortality rate here in North America began to go down, and enslaved workers tended to become a more secure financial investment. But everyone of that upper echelon expected to be treated with respect and deference. And you watch some of the programs on public television with the English manor house and the servants, and how the servants had to be so careful about what they said to the people for whom they worked. And so that really translated down. And certainly with everyone, there was initially a level of fear because you could be beaten severely and being put in a position where you are always afraid and on your guard that something's going to snap and somebody's going to want to beat you. Really, it doesn't just last through your lifetime. It lasts through generations and generations and generations. And it is just there in the culture. But certainly the Southerners had much more English influence than did the middle colonies, for example, Pennsylvania and New York, that were founded by a whole group of people, all sorts of people from all over the world were there. And then the New England colonies in the Northeast were founded for opportunity. Yes, there was a religious component to that opportunity, but they too came for opportunity, and they certainly expected children and women to be submissive to the man of the house.
Mm-hmm. So I imagine like the terms my lord, my lady turned into sir and ma'am down here.
That's exactly right.
All right. Now, we can't have a show about Nashville Nice without addressing Bless Your Heart. Tracey, can you break that down for folks who may not know?
Yes. So I'll put on my New Yorker hat.
Okay.
For Bless Your Heart, if it's used up north, a Southerner would be one who uses it because a Northerner would basically, they're very direct. And they don't mean anything by it. They don't mean to be rude. It's just they're trying to get to where they're going and get everything done. If there is something that they perceive to be stupid, they're just going to say that's stupid. They're going to say that's dumb. But as Freda mentioned, we're kind. We don't want to be perceived as being mean or rude. So we have Bless Your Heart. So if somebody says something that is perceived as that doesn't make a bit of sense, that is stupid, we will say, well, bless his heart. Bless your heart. Mm-hmm. And it is up to you if you understand what we're trying to say, because we're like, that was really dumb what you said, but I'm not going to hurt your feelings by saying it, so I'm just going to say bless your heart. And if you don't understand it, but people around us understand it, they will start snickering because they totally get it. That basically you gave them a little bit of Southern shade.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Where does it come from, Dr. Bucy?
Well, I think it comes from the religious tradition that developed here in the South. And, you know, it's an interesting time in which we live in that church attendance is going down considerably in this country. And yet people were very religious in the beginning. And I think it came out of, it had religious roots. But, you know, somebody says to you, well, I was unable to find the campus of American Baptist Bible College. And you'll say, well, bless your heart, let me give you directions. And so it's that kind of thing that it is exactly as Tracey said, well, you don't know, I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, and there's different connotations and different levels of part of it. Because part would be like, oh, bless your heart. Like, oh, you're special. Like, oh, bless your heart. Like, girl, you need prayer. Like, there's different levels of it, too, on the tone and the connotation that it happens that I think once you live in the South, you understand the degree of, oh, that was stupid, or, ooh, you need to spend some time, like, as in, like, I'm going to show you the right way. You know, I saw a meme one time, it says, there was a cookie that says, when a Southern lady says, I'm not in charge here, was code for saying they're doing it wrong. And that's part of it is like, oh, they're not following protocol or they're not being respectful. And so there's little tones and connotations that you pick up that has a little inflections where, just like Tracey said, we all know what you're saying, but they may not.
Right. So, for example,
I want to make one point about the African American community here in Nashville. I mean, they still have really good manners. You know, they refer to each other as Mr. and Mrs., and they don't call each other by their first names unless they're very good friends. And they have a great deal of communication that is very, very genteel and gracious. And so, for example, you go on the campuses here of our historically black colleges, and you'll see the manners of the students so much better than at colleges, state and private, that are not historically black institutions. And there's a huge difference. You go on the campus of Fisk and you immediately see how the students are dressed. They are dressed for respect. And in recent years, you've even seen teachers dressing down.
I know what that's all about. Look, at my house, you were straightened out if you didn't address people the correct way. I want to thank you all for this fantastic conversation. We had fifth-generation Nashvilleian Tracey Hughes Royal. She was joined by Freda Player and Davidson County historian Carole Bucy. Thanks so much to you all. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. A great pleasure.
We have to take a really short break. When we come back, we'll explore the downside of nice, how the code of nice can be inauthentic and bring harm to oneself and others. Have you run into the flip side of Nashville Nice? Tweet us about it at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil Ekalona, and this is Nashville. It's just my opinion, but I think most people want to be known as nice, as being nice. It's a good characteristic to have, but forcing yourself to be nice all the time may not feel sustainable. And forcing others to be nice, even if they have legitimate complaints, has the potential to grow into something a little more problematic, maybe even dangerous. Prioritizing niceness can lead to suppression of dissent and false narratives that prioritize the ideal harmony over the messy truth. My next guests have looked at Nashville Nice and learned about its potential downsides. Vali Forrister is a fourth-generation Nashvilleian and actress. She is joined by Benjamin Houston, the author of The Nashville Way, Racial Etiquette and the Struggle for Social Justice in a Southern City. Vali, Ben, thanks so much for being here. Welcome to This Is Nashville.
Thank you.
Now,
delighted to be here. Thank you.
Now, Vali, your family has been in Nashville for some time now. Before the break, we were talking about the concept of Nashville Nice. Did that resonate with you? Is there anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, it did resonate totally with me, especially bless your heart, because it does have thousands of meanings. But the thing that most specifically sticks out to me is that I teach the Meisner technique of acting. And my mentor, who was from New York City, told me that the greatest challenge in teaching Meisner in Nashville was getting past the veil of nice. Because the technique requires actors to have access to their authentic emotions and their instincts. And we were raised here to put being nice before being truthful, to put being nice before our real feelings. And so asking people in an acting class to go for their real feelings is really tough if they were born and raised here.
How does that interrupt what the actor's main job is to do, which is to express emotions?
That's the problem. It takes a long time to get people to just simply be truthful, because being truthful reads as rude. And the opposite of nice is rude or offensive or unpleasant, things we would never want to be.
Now, have you seen the definition of Nashville Nice change over the course of your life here?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I see it in my classroom now, because in my studio at Actors Bridge, I get students who are born and raised here, but also folks who have more recently moved here. And I think the effect that they are having on the native Nashvilleian to become more direct and see the benefits in it.
Now, Ben, you wrote the book, The Nashville Way. So what is the Nashville Way?
Well, it's a sort of stock phrase that alludes to the boosterism that was mentioned early among the Nashville elite. That was a way of trumpeting the virtues of the city, both to prospective businesses, but also to residents within, to try and inculcate a sort of shared value within the city. And I think everybody's testimony has suggested that this is powerfully true on a social level for folks. With Nashville's history, the problem is that it rests rather uneasily with the fact that it's built on a lot of mythology that Nashville likes to construct about itself and its history. And I think that has to be part of the conversation about how this works.
Well, how did that fabrication of the history, how did that play out during the civil rights movement and desegregation?
Well, it connects to this attitude of racial etiquette, which governed Southern attitudes more generally, but Nashville certainly liked to profess in no uncertain terms. There's a way in which if you are sharing a particular value, then it enables you to stifle the dissension that actually might exist within a community, right? And actually, Nashville is a rich ecosystem of different classes and races and all sorts of different social markers, and manners or shared values such as niceness end up becoming sort of a social lubricant where people can sort of navigate these tensions more or less smoothly. But when the emphasis is on being nice as opposed to becoming more just or more equitable, then that can be a problem.
How does that prevent the city from coming to real terms with its history?
Well, I think it goes back to the mythology, right? The fact that Nashville always wants to believe in the better angels of its nature, basically. And you can see throughout its history, it's constructed Parthenons. It's called itself Athens of the South, and it's called itself Nice, and it's called itself, it's given itself all these appellations, these boosteristic appellations, in order to present this image. But when you peel those back, when you have a close look at the history of race relations or labor relations or choose your subject, you actually see that the discords and the conflict within is actually much more of a compelling and richer story than what people profess to believe.
Now, Vali, you were raised in the church, right?
I was.
How did niceness factor into your upbringing?
Well, when I was growing up, Nashville was veiled in a strong dose of the prosperity gospel, which means that if God favors you, you are successful. And if you are not successful, God is punishing you for your sinful ways. So if things are going well in your life, God is smiling on you. And if they are not going well, then you're being punished for your sins. That leads people to present only what is nice, only what is cleaned up and shiny and shows God's favor, and to hide what is real and what is true and what is heartbreaking, because it might lead others to believe that they are not in God's favor.
Were those expectations set for everyone?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I think, probably more so for women, but I think for everyone.
Now, as we're talking about these niceties that were expected to come from the church community, I understand that adhering to that ideal did a lot of damage when you were in college.
Yes.
If you feel comfortable sharing, can you tell me what happened?
Yes. When I was a junior in college, I was kidnapped and raped. And the man approached me at the BP station at 8th and Wedgwood, where I was getting gas, and he asked me if I could help him jumpstart his car. And to my 22-year-old self, it did not occur to me to say no. I was raised to be a good Samaritan, and I was raised to be nice. And so I said, yes, as soon as I finish pumping gas, I can help. And then I got in my car, and he came around to get in the passenger side. And I had this little moment where my gut said, this isn't good. But I overrode it because for me not to let him into my car, to make him walk while I drove, would not have been nice. And so I reached over and unlocked the door and let him into my car. And he proceeded to pull a knife on me and kidnap me and rape me. And then I didn't tell the story. I did prosecute him, and he did go to prison for a very long time. But I did not tell anyone that story publicly because it would show that God did not show favor on me, that I was a sinner and deserved it.
What helped you find the help you needed then?
One of the big things was I was going to church at St. Augustine's Chapel, where Becca Stevens was the minister. Becca had also experienced sexual violence that she talks about very openly. She helped me a lot to reframe the story where I was not the victim of it, but the hero of the story, and to really smile on that 22-year-old girl who had such a tender heart that she didn't think twice about helping somebody in need. And to put the responsibility for the attack on the perpetrator and not on me. That took 10 years to get to. But the first time I spoke of it publicly was in the Vagina monologues that I was producing and directing at Langford Auditorium in front of 1,200 people. And I really thought that I was going to die. I mean, my friends had to carry me onto the stage so that I could own that story publicly.
And how did you feel after you were done?
Free. Immediately. Free. And the whole place rose to their feet, and I was reconstituted in that moment.
So considering what you've been through and how you've grown, what would you like to share with us about the convenience of being nice versus the authenticity of kindness, particularly to oneself?
I would say I run a program for teenage girls in the summertime called Act Like a Girl. And what I see in them is this craving for something that is real, and this craving for somebody to tell them what's really going on. And I believe that the richness of authentic connection is so much better than niceness. And that if we want to be connected to each other, that means being vulnerable enough to tell the truth about how we feel and what we see in front of us. And that also allows us to trust our instincts. Something I know I was not raised to do.
Thank you very much for sharing your story with us. Now, Ben, we see all this. How can Nashville, learn from its past and be more authentic with itself as more and more people are moving into this town?
Well, I think that it requires harder conversations that niceness may or may not be prepared to facilitate at the end of the day. As you say, everybody wants to be nice. It's important. It matters in terms of this social lubricant. But when the conversation is about tension or authenticity or all these things that are coming out, then a different rhetorical strategy might be appropriate. And of course, my book is about the history of race relations there, where all the things that have been talked about on a social level in this program were embodied in a city's personality. And in fact, it meant that less change happened rather than more, because there was such an emphasis on Nashville feeling good about itself that became more important than extending the blessings of Nashville to everybody who was in that community. And so it it comes back to how you define a community. Can you be not nice, not a Nashvilleian, and yet still be a part of the city? And I think that requires a more expansive view about how to approach such things.
About 20 seconds. Do you see Nashville's sense of niceness changing?
I think there's always the potential there, but it has to be a collective endeavor. It has to be people challenging themselves and challenging each other. And you can do that in a nice way, and you can do it in an unnice way. But bless their heart, people have to be willing to change.
That is Benjamin Houston, senior lecturer at Newcastle University and the author of The Nashville Way, Racial Etiquette and the Struggle for Social Justice in a Southern City. He was joined by the brave Vali Forrister, fourth-generation Nashvilleian and acting instructor. Thanks to you both for being with us today. Really, truly appreciate it all. We want to thank everyone who tuned in this hour. Tomorrow, once you learn to ride, you'll never forget. We'll explore bicycles and biking culture in our town. This is Nashville is a production of WPLN News and Nashville Public Radio. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Our producers are Steve Harush and Rose Gilbert. Our digital lead is Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Michaela Elias is our technical director. Our executive producer is Andrea Tudhope. The masterminds behind our theme music are Laurent and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Karen Hayes and Betsy Phillips. The conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. Find us on Instagram and tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Lake Alona. I'm getting chess pie. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. And be good to each other.